going through the Hytera Terminals portfolio. So I'll be going through the portables, mobiles, and then I'll also discuss some unique features on the Hytera portables. So if we look at the Hytera range of available products, so you'll see we've got the BD range, which is the entry-level range, which is mostly for customers that require voice, digital voice. These radios can also do analog, and then we're going to go into the PD3, PD4, which is the commercial radios, which is more also entry level, and then we'll discuss the mid-tier models, which is the PD5 and PD6, and then we'll go into the high tier or professional tier, which is the PD7, X1, and the PD9, and then I'll also talk about some features on these models, and then also on the mobiles. Okay, so if we look at the BD505, so you'll see there's also a PD305, but the PD305 is not being sold in South Africa at the moment. It is available, but because the BD5 caters for most of the requirements, there wasn't a need for us to also introduce the BD305. So one of the features on the BD505 is it can also support the feature called mixed channel. So like I mentioned in the session on Tuesday, mixed channel is a feature which allows for the radio to automatically detect if it's an analog or digital signal, and it will then automatically change into that mode, and then you can transmit also from the radio into analog or digital depending on the signal that you receive on the radio. Another feature also on the BD505 is it's available in UHF and VHF, so it supports the full band for UHF, which is 400 to 470, and for VHF it also supports the full band. It comes as standard in the box. It's got a 1500 milliamp battery, which typically gives you between 16 hours on digital and about 12 hours on analog. There is also a higher capacity battery option, which is a 2000 milliamp battery, which can give you between 16 hours on analog and 22 hours on digital. That's if you need to have longer shifts and the battery needs to last longer. You can also purchase the high capacity battery. You'll see it's very compact, very lightweight. It's only 240 grams, and you can also have up to 48 channels on the radio. So it means you can program the button on the side of the radio to switch between different zones, and the radio has a channel selector knob which can change between channel 1 up to 16, and you can have 3 zones, which gives you the 48 channels. You'll also see it's military standard and also it's IP54. So military standard meaning you can drop it, it will be okay. And IP54 meaning it's splash proof, dust proof, those type of environments it can be used. The next model is the PD3 series. So the PD365, you actually get this model in a license free as well, and then you get it in a tier 2 UHF model. It's a compact design. It can charge either via a micro USB like your cell phone, and then it can also, there's also a docking charger option as well for this radio. One of the features on the PD3, the BD505 also supports this feature, which is the pseudo trunk. I'm going to explain the pseudo trunk just now, so that you can see the benefits of using pseudo trunk on the Hytera radios. So typically on a digital radio, you have 2 time slots, which is the TDMA time division multiple access, which I also discussed in the session on Tuesday. So normally, if you configure a DMR system, you would normally have to tell the radio if it needs to use slot 1 or slot 2. The problem with this sometimes is that because you have to, when you do your fleet mapping, you have to make sure that whatever group you set on the system, you need to make sure that that group is fixed to a time slot. If the radio is programmed to use a different slot for the same group, that radio will not talk to the other radios that's programmed to work on slot 1. where if you enable the pseudo trunk, so there's a thread. Maybe just if I can ask everyone just to mute their microphones in the meantime. I'm just waiting for Fred to mute his microphone.
Sê vir hom ons is 2 noterings. Dis half.
Thank you so much, Fred. Okay, so yeah, so typically you would program a TDMA system to either work on slot 1 or slot 2. So if you have different groups, you have to decide what slot you're going to use for what group. If you don't make them all the same, they will not be able to communicate in the same group. For example, let's say if my radio is programmed to talk in group 1 on slot 1 and another radio is currently on slot 2, I will not be able to communicate to that radio until that radio is switched over to a channel that's on slot 1. Pseudo trunk is a feature that's unique to the Hytera products. So what this basically allows the radio to do is that if you enable the pseudo trunk, it will always first use slot 1 as the primary channel. If that channel is busy, it will automatically switch over and use slot 2. Meaning that you have a lot more efficiency on the radio because you can utilize the 2 time slots a lot more efficient. For example, if let's say you had to program 3 groups on a system, you would have to decide if group 1 is going to be on slot 1 or slot 2, group 2 and group 3. But one of the 2 of the groups are going to need to share the same time slot, where if you enable pseudo trunk, it doesn't matter which group talks first, they will always use slot 1 and then slot 2 will be available. So it does create a lot more efficiency for you to use or make use of the 2 time slots versus a traditional TDMA system, which only allows you to set a specific group to a time slot. So it's a very unique feature, and what I've found is if I compare some past experiences, is that some customers programmed their system to either use slot 1 or slot 2 for specific groups, and most times they find that the system is either congested or busy because 2 groups are trying to talk on the same time slot where the other slot is maybe just idling. So if you enable the pseudo trunk, it does create more efficiency for you to make use of both time slots, whichever is available out of the 2. Okay. So if we go back to the PD3 series, so like I mentioned before, it's only available in UHF, and it supports 430 to 470. It's only a 3-watt radio, meaning it can only transmit a maximum of 3 watts in high power, and in low power it's 1.5 watts. You'll also see on the standard battery, which is a 2000 milliamp battery, on analog you typically would get about 10 hours from a full charge if you have a 5590 duty cycle, and then if you use it in digital you can get up to about 12 hours on average if you use it in digital mode. It also has a display which can display 3 lines. It's very lightweight, only 160 grams. And then it can also support up to 256 channels. Because it's got a display, you can switch between different zones, and in every zone you can have 16 channels. So you can have quite a lot of channels on this radio. One thing to mention for the BD3 series is this is typically used for customers that are in the hospitality or warehousing, where it's mostly used for indoor use. It's a compact radio, like I mentioned. So it's not really used, or it wouldn't be used for customers that are working in mining environments or industrial environments. For those type of customers, I would rather suggest either for entry-level BD505, which is a non-display option, or if you're going to be using it where there's water and those type of things, then I would rather suggest to look at a radio that's IP67, especially for if it gets dropped in or submerged in water and those type of things. Okay, so the next model is the PD4 series. So the PD4 series actually comes in a few models. So you get a PD405, which is a typical tier 2 conventional radio. A lot of people ask, why is there a PD405 and a PD505? Isn't the radios doing the same? So the PD405 actually supports additional functions which you don't get on the PD505. For example, on the PD405, you can have roaming capabilities where the radio can switch between different sites over IP networks seamlessly without you needing to manually change the channel. The PD405 also supports enable-disable function. So you can also stun or disable the radio over the radio network and enable the radio as well. Which the PD505 doesn't support. There's also a option on the PD4 series, which is the PD415. Now, the only difference between a 405 and a 415 is that the 415 has a built-in RFID reader. We have a solution which is called the patrol solution, where you can have checkpoints and ID tags. You can install these on, let's say, like an office park or in a shopping center. And then the security guards that will use these radios can walk and scan these checkpoints at certain checks or certain points in a complex or in a shopping center, and it will then record it onto the patrol software. Some customers have used these or this specific solution. A good example would be, I know there was a mine in Rustenburg, Lancers. They were using this 415 with the patrol solution for their security guards that were monitoring the mine during the evenings and also during the day. I know also Sibanya Gold also deployed this solution for their security division. So there is quite a few customers that have used this solution for their security guards to be able to patrol. With the patrol software itself, you can actually set specific routes to say every day at 8 o'clock a person needs to be at the gate. He needs to scan the checkpoint. Then he needs to walk to the second point, and you can then set specific times between the checkpoints. And if the security guard does miss that checkpoint, it will actually, on the software, when you run your report, you'll be able to see which checkpoints were missed and which checkpoints were on time. You can also see there's an ID tag. So the ID tag is there for if, let's say, you have shifts, more than one security guard using the same radio. The ID tags are there for you to be able to differentiate which user was using the radio at the time. So every time when a new person comes on shift, he would use his ID tag and scan it on the radio. It will then register to the software to say this is the new user using the radio, and every activity thereafter will be registered under that person or security guard. So this can either work through a repeater network, or it can work in a simplex. So you could also have a MD785 operating in a simplex, and that can communicate and receive signal from the radios when they scan checkpoints, and it can then store it into the software. Do anyone have any questions, or can I continue? Okay, let's continue. Okay, so here's just some specifications on the PD405. So you'll see it's available in VHF and UHF. It supports the full UHF and VHF band. It comes standard with 1500 milliamp battery, which can give you in analog about 12 hours and in digital up to 16 hours. One thing I want to mention is the PD4 series, the PD5 series, and the PD6 series all share the same battery. So if you have customers that are wanting PD4 series and also maybe want something a bit more expensive, like a PD685 for their managers or supervisors, the nice thing about it is because they share the same battery, it's easier for the customer to keep extra batteries and not have to have different batteries. So the PD4, PD5, and PD6 share the same battery. You'll also see the PD4 series, like all other Hytera radios, are all military standard, which is the 810G, and the PD4 series is IP54. Okay. Next model is the PD485. Actually, I have a PD485 here with me. So the PD485 is the most cost-effective entry-level GPS-enabled option for you to have GPS on a DMR radio. It also has built-in Bluetooth. You get it in a non-GPS model, and then you get it in a GPS model. The GPS model automatically also includes Bluetooth, which means that you can then also pair Bluetooth accessories to the radio. It has the capability for you to be able to do roaming. You can disable the radio over the air. It also has a built-in clock, so on the display of the radio you can also see the time. It will use the GPS for the time, and it can also work on smart dispatch. Okay, so here's just some specifications. You'll also see in the UHF model it supports 350 to 470 megahertz, and the VHF supports 136 to 174. It's also military standard. It comes, if you use a 2000 milliamp battery, there's a 1500 milliamp and then a 2000 milliamp battery option. You can get about 22 hours in digital mode. It also has a 1.4 inch OLED display, and it's got a full keypad as well. It's IP54 like the PD405. Okay, so those models I just introduced is the entry levels, and now we're going to go into the mid-tier. So you'll see once we start talking about the PD5 and up, I'm going to be highlighting specific functions which they can support, which the previous models can't support. So the PD505, sorry, is there a question?
Yeah, from Chad.
Yes, Chad.
Sorry, just going back to the PD485, just correct me if I'm wrong, but you can actually program up the frequency on the fly without having to actually program it in as a channel. Is that correct?
Yeah, so the PD485, in the programming of the radio, you can enable the programming so that you can do it from the actual radio, from the menus. So in the menu of the radio, you do have an option to unlock it from the CPS, so you can actually manually also program or add or make changes to a specific channel or frequencies and so on. It does support that function.
Okay, now because it supports that function and you can tune up above 30 meg, surely that radio then is only available for the amateur radio market and not the commercial market in terms of the regulations.
So if when you program the PD485, you can unlock that menu, or you can keep it locked. If you don't allow the user to have access to that menu, then they will not be able to manually change frequencies on the radio. So it's a feature that you as the reseller, when you program it for your customer, you can enable or disable that function for the end user not to be able to make changes on the radio.
Could we possibly pick up on this outside of your presentation, please, Franco?
Yes, perfect. Okay. Yeah, we can.
Thanks. Okay.
So from here on, we're going to go into the mid-tier ones. So the first model here is the PD505 and the PD565. One thing I want to mention about the models is you'll see normally all portables are normally a PD in the beginning, except the BD505 and the X1. But the P stands for portable, D stands for digital, 5 meaning the series. If it has a 0 after the 5, it means it's a non-display, non-keypad. So it's only got a speaker and microphone. If it has a 5-6, so if the second number is a 6, it means it's got a semi-key with a display. And if it has an 8 here, it means it's got a screen with a full keypad. And then the 5 represents the region where the radio is sold into. So we fall under the European standards. So that's why all our models end with a 5. Okay. So the PD505 can also support XPT single site. So if you are planning to offer a customer a XPT solution or XPT system, then they can buy PD505. Once they go multi-site, it's recommended to use the PD605, which can support XPT multi-site. This radio can also support scanning for analog and digital in the same scan list. It also supports encryption. So out of the box, standard, it can do up to 32-bit encryption. There is also an enhanced encryption option as well, where you can do up to 256-bit encryption. It also supports pseudo trunking, same as the PD4, same as the BD505, and it can also work on smart dispatch. Even though it does not have GPS, it does have the radio registration service. So this is an important function to have for you to be able to use it on smart dispatch, because the radio needs to be able to send its online status when it's switched on and registering to the network, and also when you switch it off, it will send an offline status. The PD 485 does also support this, and also the PD405, but the BD505 doesn't do radio registration service. Okay, so that's just so let me explain quickly XPT. So typically on a conventional system, you will have time slot 1 and time slot 2. If you enable the pseudo trunk, the radio will dynamically switch between slot 1 and slot 2. XPT is like a almost like a, if I had to compare XPT to other products in the market, we can compare it to the Motorola Capacity Plus and the Link Capacity Plus. So it's a trunking solution, but it's a proprietary system. So XPT stands for Extended Pseudo Trunk. So let's say if you had a XPT system and you had more than one repeater on a site, if the one repeater slot 1 and slot 2 becomes busy, the radios will automatically start using the second repeater slot 1, slot 2, and so on. You can have actually up to a maximum of 8 repeaters on a single site, which means you'll have 16 channels available for the radios to use. So it can take more traffic at a single point in time because of multiple repeaters and more time slots. So that's what XPT is. It's extended pseudo trunk. Okay, so here's a typical example. So you would normally also, when you set up an XPT system, you would also have to specify to the radio which repeater will be the home repeater. That's the repeater it will always access first. If that repeater becomes busy, it will then start going to the second or the third repeater. So if you have multiple groups, you can select which radio needs to register to which repeater as the home repeater. It will always then access that repeater first. If that repeater becomes busy, it will then start switching to the other available repeaters. Every time when a call gets initiated from a radio into a XPT system, this will be communicated to the other repeaters, which will then know which slots are open and available. Once a slot becomes available again, this will be communicated to all the repeaters and to all the radios in the system. Okay. So here's a PD505 specification. It's available in UHF and VHF. The UHF is a 4 watt and the VHF is a 5 watt. Like I mentioned before, the PD5, PD6 and PD4 shares the same battery. So you get 1500, which is a standard battery. And you also have a high capacity 2000 milliamp battery option. You'll see the non-display PD505 is about 260 grams, where the display semi-key PD565 is about 280 grams. The display radio can support up to 512 channels, where the non-display PD505 can support up to 256 channels. It's also military standard like all other DMR Hytera radios, and this radio is IP54. Okay, now we're going to go into the PD6 series. So from this PD6 series up, all the radios are going to be IP67, meaning you can submerge them in water and they'll be fine. As long as you don't keep them for longer than 2 hours at about 1.5 meters in depth, they'll be able to withstand water. So the PD605, you get this option, or this radio, you get it with a GPS option. You also get man-down functionality in this radio. I did explain man-down on Tuesday, but I'll explain it again. So the radio's got a built-in sensor. If it's tilted at a specific angle and left there, it can automatically send an emergency to the dispatching software or to a specific group. This is used where if you have a person that's walking by himself and he trips and gets hurt, the radio can also act as a safety feature where it will send an emergency if the person hasn't corrected the radio when it's on its side. There's also a Bluetooth option for the PD6 series. It's a Bluetooth adapter that can connect to the side of the radio. And this then allows for it to also connect to Bluetooth accessories. The PD6 also can do a DMR Tier 3 trunking. There's a license that you can purchase for this specific radio, which will allow for it to also be able to work on a trunking system. It can also work on an MPT 1327 system as well, which is the equivalent to a Tier 3 trunking system, but for analog. And like I mentioned, it's IP67. Okay. So here it just explains IP67. So it means that you can submerge the radio for 30 minutes at 1 meter. And it also explains the encryption, how the encryption works. You can have an advanced encryption, which is allowed by, and then it gives you 256-bit encryption as well. Here's just some specifications on the PD6. You'll see, which I didn't mention, is you'll see the PD6 is available in 3 options. So you get a 605, so O meaning speaker microphone. If it's a 6, it's a screen with semi-key, and if it's an 8, it's a screen with a full keypad. This radio can also support text messaging. You can do text messages one-to-one or one to a group, and a single text message can be up to 256 characters. Okay. This radio, like the PD5, can also do roaming. It supports enable, disable. It can also do scan between analog and digital in the same scan list. Okay. Okay, the next model I'm going to talk about is the PD7 series. So the PD7, there's a non-display option and a display option. This is one of our most popular radios currently being sold in the market. Just to name a few key customers that are buying these specific models is, for example, I know the South African police are buying these models where they are using their radios in analog. This radio supports the 5-tone signaling. It also supports 2-tone. So it's also being sold to like Transnet is buying these. We have a lot of customers that are buying these. Even FleetCall are using a PD785 on the trunking DMR network in South Africa. So these are just some key features for the PD785. So it can operate in 6 different modes. So it can work as an analog conventional. It can work as a Tier 2 DMR terminal. It can work in an MPT 1327 system. It can work in a Tier 3 system. It can work on a simulcast system, and it also supports, like I mentioned before, the 5-tone and 2-tone as well. It also has an external Bluetooth accessory option, so you can connect an accessory to this radio and it will allow it to have Bluetooth capabilities. It also has built-in vibration, so you can enable this, especially if you're in noisy environments. The radio can also vibrate, and you can then also feel the radio against your body vibrating, knowing that someone is looking for you. And it also supports the optional board. So the optional board is for specific customers that want to develop their own third-party encryption. This is available for this radio, and they can develop their own encryption board that can fix to this radio to allow for them to have third-party encryption. And it also can do advanced encryption with a license you can buy. Okay. Just some frequencies the PD7 is available in. So it's available in UHF, VHF, also in special frequencies like your 350 to 400. I think you also get it in an 800 megahertz frequency, but it's not being used in South Africa. In other countries, they are using that. So in the standard packaging of a PD785, it comes with a 2000 milliamp battery. There's also a 2500 and a 3000 milliamp battery option as well. It's got on the display radio, it's got a 1.8-inch LCD display, and it can support 6 lines. If we look at the channel capacity, the same like the PD6 85, you can do 1024 channels on this radio. So you can have 64 zones and 1024 channels. Even though I've never found a customer that needs so many channels, I think the most amount of channels I've ever seen on a radio is about 250 or so channels. Okay, it's IP67. Okay, the next model I'm going to talk about is the X1. So the X1P, comes as standard out of the box with built-in Bluetooth, with GPS, with man down. You don't have an option to not take GPS or not take man down. It comes with all of these functions. You can also add advanced encryption with a license, and you can also buy a tier 3 license for it to work in a tier 3 system. It can also work on MPT as well. You'll see it's very slim design. It's only 21 millimeters thick. So this type of radio is mostly used for COVID type of customers that want to have communications on them, but they want it to be COVID for them to be secret. So like your private security or your private protection services, those type of customers would use a X1. You'll also see here some accessory options for the X1, like this COVID type of accessory. So you could have a radio on your body, and then you can have a PTT, let's say, in your pocket. You can have a microphone on your collar, and then you can have earpiece in your ear. And it will not be visible to some people to know that you have communication on you. Okay. Here's just some specifications. You'll see it's very much aligned to the PD7. So it's also IP67. You get it in UHF and VHF. It comes as standard. It comes with a 1100 milliamp battery, which can give you about 7 to 10 hours. But you also have an option for 1400 or 1800 milliamp battery, which can give you up to 15 hours on digital. Okay. The next model I'm going to talk about is the PD9. So the PD985 was released back in 2018. This radio is the first full duplex DMR radio that was available to the market. It's also IP68. So like the X1 and the PD7, it's only IP67. This one is IP68, so it's got more waterproof. So it can also withstand water much better than the 785 and X1. This radio also supports what we call SFR. So I'm sure some of you have heard of SFR. So SFR stands for single frequency repeat. So how this works is this radio will receive a signal from another radio, or let's say on slot 1, and it will retransmit that signal on slot 2. Similar to what a repeater would do, it will receive a signal from a frequency and it will retransmit on a different frequency. This radio uses the 2 time slots for receiving and transmitting. You can also do a full duplex call on this radio. So if you have 2 duplex radios, you can do a full duplex call between the 2 radios. The one radio will transmit on slot 1 and the other radio will receive on slot 1, and the other radio will transmit on slot 2, and this radio will receive on slot 2. And you'll have that full duplex functionality. It also has a Bluetooth option, and also it has GPS. It also has a built-in clock. So on the display of the radio, you can also see the time. And it also has an option for you to be able to do voice recording on the radio itself. You can insert a micro SD card. There's a license that you have to purchase to unlock the recording. And then you can have on the radio itself, you can record conversations and play them back from the radio. You can also remove the micro SD card and download the recordings onto your computer as well. And it also has noise cancellation. Okay, so just to explain again the SFR. So for example, let's say I was standing here and I was transmitting, and this user here is too far away for them to receive my signal, but the PD985 is close enough. It will receive my signal and rebroadcast the signal, and it will be received by this user. What's nice about this specific function is when I'm transmitting, it's sending my caller ID, the group information, everything to this radio. This radio is forwarding. So this user that's receiving the signal will know that it's me speaking. It's not seeing this information, it's seeing my information. The PD985 is the only portable radio that can support this function. There is also an option on the MD785 when we get to the mobiles now, which also supports SFR. There's a duplex MD785 available in VHF and also in UHF. Okay. And then we also have some IS radio options. So we've got IS and then we've got ATEX. So IS is not as protected as what we have when we're looking at ATEX. So IS normally would be the battery, but the transmission power is normal 5-watt transmission. Where if we look at ATEX radios, it's not just the battery, but the actual main board. There's specific spacing between components. It's a lot more IS certified. It's an international ATEX is the highest standard you can get for IS, where the UL913 is a lower IS rating. So typically where you could use ATEX radio would be customers like Sasol or Natrev, or those type of customers would use ATEX. Even for some coal mines, they also require a EX, which is the ATEX, and also IA. So here's just some information about the PD985. So you'll see the spacing between certain components for them not to be able to cause any spark or any hazardous sparks for igniting explosive gases. And then also you'll see on this side, you'll see also every single component has a shield around it, and it's also has silicone injected into this to make it more IS against the normal UL913. So just some information about it. So it's got a patent battery latch. I don't have a PD795 here with me, but like normal radios, you would typically have one lever that you would have to pull to remove the battery, where with the PD795, there's two motions that you have to do in order for you to be able to remove the battery. And the battery also can't detach like this. It actually slides into the radio to prevent it from coming loose from the main chassis of the radio. It also has a light design. It has anti-static, so the plastic and the way it's developed is anti-static, so it can't create static. I see there's someone wanting a question. Let me just see. Hi, Sarah, any questions? Okay, so do you need a special charger for the battery? No, you don't. So the PD795 uses the same charger as the PD7, PD6, PD5, PD4. So you don't need a special charger. The only special thing that you need is the accessories. So certain accessories are only able to work on the PD795 ATEX radio because the accessories also need to be ATEX. So a normal PD785 accessory won't work on a PD795. There's an additional pin on the accessory connector. If that pin isn't present when you connect it to the PD795 ATEX radio, the accessory won't work. So to prevent people using non-ATEX accessories with an ATEX radio. Okay, I hope that answered the question. Okay, and the next, just to give you some specifications. So on the PD715 and 795, the only difference between these two is this is a non-display and this is a display keypad option. Like I mentioned before, it's only can transmit up to 1 watt because that's the ATEX standards. And also, if you look at the battery, it's a 1,800 milliamp battery, which can give you on average about 17 hours in digital and 14.5 on analog. You'll see also it weighs a lot more. The reason being is because it also has the shielding, the silicone, all of those inside the radio. It does weigh more because it's got more protection on the radio for it to be ATEX. You'll also see it's military standard and it's also IP67. It can also do 1,024 channels. It can also support tier 3 trunking if you purchase the license for it. And it also has a option for you to have man down and GPS. Okay. Okay, and then if we look at the UL913s, so you'll see the specification is exactly the same as the normal PD6 or PD5 or PD7. The only difference is that this has a IS battery, and also it does have some protection on the radio, but not as much as the ATEX. Okay. Okay, now we're going to go into the mobiles. So we will first discuss the entry levels, and then we'll talk about the high tier ones. So currently we have two models on the entry level, which is the MD615 and MD625. The only difference between the two radios is the one will only show you a channel number, where the 625 will show you the channel name, and it will also show you the alias on the display. When someone's transmitting, you can actually see the name of the person or the radio ID. The MD615 also has an option for you to have built-in Bluetooth, as well as the MD625, so you can take it with or without Bluetooth. If you take the one with Bluetooth, you can then connect Bluetooth accessories to the radio. Okay, and there's also a Bluetooth option. I'll explain it now. So just some features for the MD615 and 625. So it can support analog or digital, same as all other DMR radios. It has a capability for you to have GPS. There's an external GPS module that can connect to the back of the radio, which will allow for you to have GPS capabilities. It also supports basic encryption. If you take the built-in Bluetooth option, you can have Bluetooth accessories like I mentioned. It also supports roaming. If you have IP multi-site or repeaters connected over an IP network, the radios can automatically switch between different sites without you needing to manually change the channel. And also for dispatching, meaning from Smart Dispatcher or from Smart One, you can communicate to the radio. You can see if it's online, offline, and also it supports pseudo trunk, same as all other Hytera radios. So here just shows you the GPS module that you can purchase, which is a POA134. It connects to the back of the radio, and then you can connect GPS antenna to this, and then it will unlock for the radio to support GPS functionality, and then you can track this radio using Smart Dispatch. Okay. Here's just some specifications. So if we look at the MD615 and MD625, it's available in UHF and VHF. You get a low power and a high power option. So the low power is the 25 watts. That's what we use in South Africa. But there is also a high power option available. The UHF can support up to 45 watts, and the VHF is 50 watts. Because in South Africa, ICASA only allows us to transmit 25 watts and not more. You wouldn't typically sell these high power ones in South Africa, but for some African countries, they are allowed to transmit more than 25 watts, and then this option is available for the customers. It's got a built-in speaker, which is 4 watts, and it can a maximum of 6 watts. For the 615, which doesn't have a full-on display, it can have 2 digits, so it can have digit 1, 2, 3, 4 up to 99. And then for the display 625, it's got a 1.5 inch display, which can do 2 lines. You'll also see it operates in 13.6 volt, which is your normal operating voltage. Sorry. And then you'll see the weight is only 1.1 kilograms. And for the non-display model, you can have up to 48 channels, and for the display model, you can have up to 256 channels. It's also IP54, and it's also military standard. Okay. The next model is the MD785i. So this is one of the most popular mobile radios. It's been around also for the longest. A lot of customers in South Africa purchase these MD785s. For example, Transnet has bought some of these. SAPs have been buying these. A lot of customers have been buying MD785s. They're very popular, very flexible. There's a lot of solutions and a lot of things you can do with them. They also support dual mode, analog or digital. You have an option to take it with GPS and an option not to take GPS. It even is available as an analog only option. If you don't want it to be a digital radio, you can have it as an analog only, and then you can buy a license later on to unlock the data or DMR functionality. It's available in a full duplex, similar to the PD985. You can also, the full duplex model also supports SFR, which then will allow for you to do the single frequency repeat. It's also available in a high power, so similar to the 615 and 625, where you can have it as a low power up to 25 watts and a high power up to 50 watts. and it also has a remote control head accessory as well. Okay, so here's just an example of a motorbike solution. So you could install a MD785 in the motorbike here at the back, and it can then interface to an LCD display, which you can install here on the handlebars, and also you can have a handle PTT. This MD785 also has an accessory you can connect to the front of this radio, which gives it Bluetooth capability. So it can either from here connect to this via Bluetooth or with a physical cable that you can run between the radio and this LCD display. Okay, here's another solution also for a MD785. If you're going to be using it as a base station, we also have this PS16001 as an option. A radio installs into this little cabinet, and you'll see also it's got a handlebar at the top. So if you need to move it around, today you're at one location, tomorrow you're at a different location, you can actually, it's easy to move it from one location to the next. And at the back of this, there's no picture here now, but at the back it's got a input for you to connect AC power. It also has a DC input, and then also you've got from here, you've got where you can connect your antenna as well. So it's also a nice solution for some customers that want mobility for a base station. Just some specifications. So it's available in UHF, VHF. Like I mentioned, high power, low power. It has a 2-inch display. What else? 1024 channels. You'll see here the sensitivity is also better than on some other radios. And then it's also IP54 and military standard. Okay. That's basically it for me. Is there any questions that anyone have or want to know more about on any specific models or so? Anyone? Any questions? Okay, so let me maybe also share some unique features on the PD785 and PD6. Okay, which radios don't require licenses? Okay, so you get different types of licenses. So it could be are you referring, Busi, are you referring to licenses for you to be able to use them, like ICASA frequency licenses, or are you talking about actual licenses to unlock specific functions or features? To unlock features. Okay, so on all of the radios, if you want trunking, Tier 3 trunking or MPT, there's a license that you need to buy. It doesn't come as standard in the radio. All the radios are analog and DMR. There's no licenses needed. You can order the MD785 and the PD785 as an analog only option. If you want roaming capabilities on any of the radios, you have to, for Tier 2, you have to buy the roaming license. If you are going to be using the PD785 or MD785 or PD685 in a Tier 3 system, there's no roaming licenses needed for it to be able to roam between different sites in Tier 3. It's included in the Tier 3 license. Enable disable functionality on some models like the PD4 series. You have to purchase the license for you to be able to use the enable disable function. From the PD5 series and up, the enable disable function is already in the radio. For priority interrupt, from the PD4 series, PD5 series, there's a license for you to have enable disable. But from the PD6 and up, it's already in there. Do you have POC radios or you don't sell it? Okay, yes, we do have POC terminals. We're going to do a session on the POC terminals. Let me just check on the calendar quickly. Hold on. We are doing a session. Let me just check quickly on which date we're doing that. Okay, so we're going to be talking about the POC terminals on the 14th of September. So we'll just be talking about the POC platform as well as the different POC terminals. But yes, we do have POC terminals that we can sell, yes. Let me just share my screen again. Another feature also maybe that I didn't mention is from the PD5 series and up, it also can there's a feature inside the radio that when you program the radio, it can the feature is called auto power adjust. So when the radio detects the signal being received from the repeater is a very strong signal, you can determine how many decibel the signal needs to be. If it detects the signal is strong, it will operate in low power. If you're moving away from the repeater, the radio will detect the signal is weaker, and it will then switch into high power. So the benefits of this is that if you're close to the repeater, your radio doesn't need to transmit at 5 watt. It can use 1 watt to be able to communicate. Let me see. Sarah asked a question. Does Hytera still produce LF radios? Yeah, the PD365 is available in license free. And also the BD505, there's a license-free option, and also the PD505, there's a license-free option. The PD3 series, there used to be a PD355 that has been discontinued, and the only PD3 series that's still available is the PD365. What about over-the-air programming? I joined webinar late. Okay, so yeah, so over-the-air programming is supported by the PD4 series, PD5, PD6, PD7. You can either do it from a radio that has a screen and a keypad, or you can do it from Smart Dispatcher, or there is also a separate program or software that's just for over-the-air programming. But yeah, the PD4 series, PD5, PD6, PD7, X1, PD9, all of them support over-the-air programming. Please explain the difference and benefits of SFR and simplex. That's from Joe. Okay, so simplex is if you're transmitting, okay, so you get two types of simplex. So you get DMO, which is direct mode operation, meaning radio to radio, there's no repeat or anything. And then you get simplex, you get half duplex and full duplex. So half duplex is transmit or receive. You're not doing both at the same time. Full duplex is receiving and transmitting at the same time. And then SFR is single frequency repeat. So that's if you are, if a customer has a simplex single frequency, meaning your transmit and your receive is the same frequency, and the customer wants to have a bigger coverage, you can use SFR to increase your coverage because the radio will use the slot 1 and slot 2 for receiving and transmitting. You can have even up to repeater coverage using SFR. I've done some tests before using a MD785 duplex with SFR, and if you connect it to an external antenna at a high point, you get repeater-like coverages from using SFR. I hope that answers the question for you, Joe.
Yeah, it does. Thank you very much, Franco.
Okay. Is there any other questions anyone have? Want to know more about last time you have to yeah, so yeah, we still have the two options. So the one is the PD985, which can do SFR, which is like a repeater but on simplex frequency, and then the other one is the MD785, which you can get in the full duplex. Okay, so SFR to POC. So POC stands for push over cellular, SFR is single frequency repeat. We do have solutions where you can interface DMR systems to PTT. You wouldn't normally use SFR to connect to a POC terminal, but you can from a MD785, because it's got an accessory port on the back of the radio, you can back-to-back it to a POC terminal if the POC terminal also has external inputs for you to be able to trigger the PTT and send audio in and out of the radio. So you can do back-to-back between a SFR mobile and a POC terminal if the POC terminal supports the correct inputs for you to be able to trigger the PTT and receive audio in and out of the PTT device. I hope that answers the question for you, Ian. Okay, any other questions anyone else has? Okay,
yes,
thanks,
please, Franco. Can I ask a question?
Yeah, sure,
It's probably
Sarah.
going to take me. It's probably going to take me longer if I have to type it.
No
I
problem.
missed the first few. I missed the first few minutes of the meeting, or rather the training. I just
Yes.
need to find out from you the BD505.
Yes.
Can it between analog and digital? Like, can it switch automatically from analog to digital?
Yes. Yeah. So when you program a BD505 radio, you can select it to operate as an analog channel, or it can be as a digital channel. And then there's also an option for you to enable the mix channel. If you enable the mix channel, the radio will, if let's say someone's transmitting from an analog radio, the BD505 will detect the signal and detect that it's analog, and you'll be able to transmit back to that analog radio in analog mode. If another radio, which is digital, transmits in digital, the BD505 will detect that it's a digital signal, and it will then also be able to transmit back in digital. So yes, the BD505 does support mixed channel. Also keep in mind, mixed channel and scan is two different things. So mixed channel, same frequency, but detecting analog or signal or digital signal on the same frequency. Scanning is when you're scanning between different frequencies from different sources or from different systems. So scanning in mixed channel is not the same. Okay.
Franco.
Yes, Enoch.
Just to explain, as far as I understand, the BD5 only has mixed RX. It does not have a mixed mode channel as such. So you can receive on both, but you'll only be able to transmit on whatever type of channel you're already programmed on.
Yes, let me show you an example. I'll open the CPS programming software. Can you guys still see my screen?
Yep.
Okay, let me just get a default
yes,
file out of the. Okay. So let me somewhere to use that one. Okay, so if we look under the channel, so it only has analog or digital. But if you go into the actual digital channel, you'll see it's got this mix RX.
Yes.
Okay. So the mix RX, sorry, let me just minimize this part here because I can't see. Well, let me move it this way. So you'll see as soon as I enable the mix RX, it will be able to receive on whatever values I put here. So this is a continuous tone. And then while it's receiving on analog, you also have the option to be able to talk back in analog to the radio that's transmitting to you. So if, let's say, you program the mix channel on a digital channel here, the radio as default, if there's no activity coming into the radio, it will, if you press the PTT, it will talk out in digital. But if it receives analog, it will have the option for you to be able to communicate back in analog. If you had to use the mix channel on an analog channel, you'll see you can enable this. Yeah. If the radio has no activity and I pick it up and I transmit, it will transmit as default out in analog. But if it receives digital signal coming into it, it will receive on whichever group you've selected as your digital group, and you'll also be able to communicate back to the radio from here. Okay.
Okay, but that only works for if you have digital and analog on the same frequencies.
On the same frequency, yeah. So the TX and the RX, yeah, is the same for on the analog groups and the digital groups. That's where scanning is different. Scanning is where
Okay.
you have different frequencies and
we're having some difficulty at the moment because of the BD505. The latest revision removed scanning between analog and digital. So we've got
yes.
existing clients that have BD5s in the field as a bridge between, where they're starting to transition to DMR, but now they cannot buy new BD5s because it just doesn't support the same feature anymore.
Yeah, like this year, which is the version 3. So I can tell you why the function is not there anymore. Is that we had to make some changes on the BD505 due to some semiconductor shortages globally. And because of the changes that we had to make on the radios in order for us to continue supplying, this function was not included on these new models.
Okay. Is there any plans to include them in the future? If there's,
So by November this year, we will be able to have the version 3 available again. And then for the existing ones, this function won't be available for some time still.
Okay. What's the next
Franco,
available?
Sorry. Oh, sorry.
I just want to ask, what's the next model up that would support scanning between analog and digital? Would that be the PD4?
The PD505. The PD4 doesn't support this scan function between analog and digital in the same scan list. Only the PD5 and up.
Okay.
Okay, that's the same question I wanted to ask that Andrew was asking. I wanted to ask the same question because we have a problem at the moment where clients are bringing up the same problem that we've just addressed with you now, that the radios, these current ones that we're selling to them now, are not able to do that functionality. So I guess the next option would be then for them to take the next model up, which is the PD505.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions anyone has? Right, I see there's a message from Joe. Can you link POC units to DMR Smart Dispatch System or Smart One XPT or XPT? Okay. You can link a POC terminal to a DMR system, but for Smart Dispatch, because you're going to be using audio in and out, there's no intelligence or no data that's going to be connected between the two devices. You will be able to get audio into Smart Dispatch, but for tracking capabilities, it's not going to be possible to do it on Smart Dispatch. Smart Dispatch was originally developed for tier 2 systems. Smart One does have the functionality for you to connect it to the Hytera POC 6000 platform, which will allow for you to be able to do tracking on POC terminals and DMR terminals from the same dispatching software. But for Smart Dispatch itself, Smart Dispatch is a tier 2 conventional system dispatching solution and was never developed systems, which is push over cellular. At Jonathan, at Franco, the recording will be available. Yes, Jonathan, we will make the recording available. Okay, Joe, did I answer your question about the dispatching in POC? Okay,
Franco, just a question, please. Sorry, I can see that we're overrunning. Just one last question. Which other radio allows SFR except for the PD985 on the portables? Because I know the MD785s does have the functionality. You can enable the functionality on the full duplex radio.
Yeah, so the SFR is only. Okay.
Okay, yes, go ahead.
So the SFR function is only available for radios that can do full duplex. because the radio needs to be able to do full duplex in order for it to be able to receive and transmit. So the only option on a portable is the PD985 that has full duplex capabilities, where you can then buy the SFR license for it to support SFR. And then on the MD785, not the normal MD785, there is a MD785 duplex model. And that duplex model has the capabilities for you to load an SFR license, which will then give you the SFR capabilities. So no other radios can support SFR except the PD985 and the MD785 duplex.
Okay, so
and it is available in VHF and UHF on the MD785 duplex and also on the PD985.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much. Okay, thank you, Franco.
Okay, no problem. Any other questions anyone has? Okay, then I think we can call it a day for today. The next session will be next week, Tuesday, which is the 24th of August, same time, 10 o'clock to 11. We will be talking about the smart dispatcher. I'll see if I can get a working demo system working for that presentation, so I can do some demonstrations as well for the session next week, Tuesday. Okay, thank you. Thanks, Lorinda. Okay, thank you so much, everyone. Have a good Thursday, and we'll talk again next week.
Thanks, Franco.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome, guys.